Hey guys, and welcome back. When it comes to Pokémon, hopefully you've seen me struggling to make our slimy friend Muck, as well as a creepy version of Tangela. But, naturally, for today's project, I'll be sculpting the bane of my existence in Super Smash Bros., and that is of course, Mimikyu. So with that in mind, let's get started. As always, I crumpled up some aluminum foil for the basic shapes and covered the surface with an even layer of polymer clay. Next, I made two cone shapes for the ears and bent those into the correct angle. Once those were covered with Sculpey and blended into the rest of the head, I started making a bunch of little triangles. Essentially, Mimikyu is hiding underneath a costume, so that means the first layer of these triangles will be his body poking through, and the upper layer will be the edge of his costume that's placed over top. After that, I made two small marks for the center of his eyes, then, using a ballpoint stylus, began drawing the swirls and scribbles until they were the correct size. I also noticed that his face wasn't quite the right shape, so I did some invasive jaw surgery, and now that the angle is looking so much better, it's time to start working on that smile. Naturally, the best part about Mimikyu is this crazy expression that he has. So, in order to make that squiggly mouth happen, I took a slanting angle just as a reference, starting at the top, arching down towards the bottom, and just put in a bunch of crazy angles. Next, I made two small dots on his body and created the eye holes that Mimikyu is looking through out underneath his costume. Now that Mimikyu can actually see, I also etched in a few more scribbles and some extra textures that are going to help later when it comes to painting. All of this is looking good so far, but I still need to make that stick that Mimikyu is holding pretending to be a tail. To make that happen, I started off by bending some wire into the correct shape. Because the tail is going to be top-heavy with a narrow base attaching it to the main part of the sculpt, I decided against using regular Sculpey, and instead went with a stronger material. This gray Super Sculpey is fantastic for any part of a sculpt that might be under some stress or have to support its own weight. Where regular Sculpey can break relatively easily, Super Sculpey has a bit more elasticity to it, so even when fully baked, it's just a stronger material in general. Once the tail was fully covered in clay and the wooden texture had been applied, I made sure to attach it onto Mimikyu and anchor it into place. At this point, I'm happy with the sculpt. Mimikyu looks like Mimikyu to me, so it's time to turn on the oven and bake this sculpture for 45 minutes. Now, when it comes to painting, Mimikyu is sort of a desaturated yellow. I didn't have the exact shade of paint, so I just started mixing a vibrant yellow with a medium silver. This made for a decent sort of mustardy color that I ended up using as a base coat. From there, I desaturated the yellow a bit more and painted on two layers on top of the base. The easy thing when it comes to Pokémon is that because they come from an anime, all of their color palettes are relatively simple. With the base colors down, I really just had to go in with a few layers of black here and there and add in the fine details. Eventually, once both ears were fully painted and looking good, I carefully lined the eye holes with a layer of black as well. Next, it was time to paint his feet underneath his costume. I also made sure to paint the bottom of the sculpture so it looks a bit more finished. The mouth, on the other hand, that turned out to be a bit of a challenge. As much as I love painting, I really don't have the steadiest of hands when it comes into fine details like this. But the good thing with acrylic is that if you ever mess up, totally no worries, you can just paint over it. After that, I watered down some black paint and applied it to the texture around the eyes. Of course, I made sure to water down some red paint as well, all for that natural Mimikyu blush. Now, the best part of this entire process was actually applying all the scribbles over top of the textures of the eyes. I started working with a fine tip marker and drew in all the details. Now, I still have to paint the tail, so I found a bunch of browns and yellow paint. I applied them in varying intensities to create the striation patterns you might find on the bark of a tree. While the tail was drying, I also went back in and actually added in a couple highlights to Mimikyu's eyes, as well as his smile. However, he was still looking a little bit too clean, so as always, I watered down some black paint and applied a few layers all over the surface. I'm honestly so happy with the way this whole thing turned out. Pokémon are always really fun to work on, so if you have any suggestions for what Pokémon you'd like to see me work on next, definitely leave a comment down below. Finally, after all that, this Mimikyu sculpture is complete. But for now, all that's left to do is sit back and enjoy the final result.